again?
I warned you, but did you listen to me? Oh, no, you knew it all, didn't you? Oh, it's just a harmless little bunny, isn't it? Well, it's always the same. I always tell them,
shut up!
do they listen to me?
Right.
Oh, no.
Now, do you think that the apostles and the early church celebrated the resurrection of their Messiah every year by observing the feast of Ishtar? Do you think the apostles had a mass on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox, when Semiramis fell from heaven into the Euphrates River in a giant moon egg? Do you think the apostles would have dyed Easter's eggs in the sacrifice baby's blood, and then have some orgies surrounded by rabbits with temple prostitutes to make new sacrifices? No matter how loyal you are to any system, you know the true answer to that question. Then what is our excuse? The Feast of Ishtar isn't even at the right time to pretend to be about the resurrection. So how did the apostles in the early uncorrupted church celebrate the resurrection of their Messiah? Well, the same way they have been doing it since Moses climbed Mount Sinai. That's right, you heard correctly. The nation of Israel had long been observing the death, the burial, and the resurrection of their Messiah for 1,500 years before he even came to earth. God instructed his people exactly how to observe the crucifixion of his son, the burial, and his resurrection. If we would only read the scriptures that we set next to our beds at night, we would know exactly when and how to celebrate the resurrection. And then we wouldn't have to go and pick the nearest Babylonian sex goddess feast to worship in his name instead. Here's how it basically works. The Passover sacrifice, representing Messiah on the cross, was to be observed on the 14th of the month of the Aviv, the first month of the year. This just so happened to be the exact time and date that Messiah would later be sacrificed. Then, just as the sun was going down that next following evening, as it became the 15th, God instructed his people to put the sacrificed Passover lamb into the oven. This happened to occur at the exact time and date that Messiah someday would be put into his tomb. Then began the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which allowed Israel to reflect on Messiah's sinless life as he laid in the grave. And it has a lot of other really good meanings too. We can't get into them all right now. Then, after that, the day after the next coming Sabbath, right as the sun went down that Saturday, then it was the Feast of the First Fruits, where the priests of Israel would go and do a wave sheaf offering of barley before the Lord. This was done at the exact same time that the true high priest, the Son of the living God, was resurrected from the dead and presented his first fruit offering to his Father in heaven. These feasts were all chronologically aligned and arranged ahead of time to celebrate precisely the death, burial, and resurrection of Messiah 1,500 years before it happened. Amazing. I mean, exactly at the same times is when it actually occurred, when it was fulfilled. So if God commands us to celebrate his son's resurrection by keeping the Feast of the First Fruits, then why don't we do that today? Why are we celebrating the Feast of Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess of war and sex, in the name of his resurrection? It doesn't really make any sense when you think about it. I think there's a couple reasons here. The main reason probably is just because we have become so spiritually lazy and have become completely disconnected with the scriptures. We just do what everyone else does. We pay that guy up front with the robes and the microphone to read all the scripture for us so that we can spend our time, watching Miami CSI or Dancing with the Stars or whatever takes up all our time. We, especially in America, have become so rich and increased with goods to where we now have need of nothing. Although we might still play church, Messiah himself says in his letter to us that we have become wretched, miserable, poor, naked, and blind, and that we don't even know it. The other big reason is that following what God has instructed us to do has historically led to enormous suffering and persecution. The early church and the apostles were so fired up about the gospel already that they weren't too worried about getting fired up by the Romans because they were so fired up about the gospel. But after more than 1,700 years of hardcore persecution, most of it by the church itself, there have been very few left that will stick their heads out and say the truth on this. The churches don't necessarily use their instruments of torture anymore, but they don't need to. I mean, we've become pretty well smothered by the world now. If you want to walk with what the real Lord said to do, you are very likely to walk that path with him alone. I'll admit that on Easter, when you see the little kids all dressed up and they're so happy and they got their Easter basket and they're running around chasing their eggs or whatever they're doing, the little kids are just really cute. There's no doubt about that. But a little kid being cute doesn't make the feast of the Assyrian and Babylonian goddess of sex and war cute. It just can't do it, no matter how cute the little girl might be. Most people have no idea about this. And my job isn't to go around yelling at people. My job is just, as a follower of Messiah, just to state reality. I just state the facts. We're supposed to just cast the seed. Some of the seed lands on good soil, and it grows and bears fruit. Some of the seed lands on rocks, and it doesn't grow and bear fruit. Some of it lands on the road. It gets taken away because there's so much traffic. God defines exactly who he is with his word, his scriptures. He explains exactly what he wants from us, how he wants to be worshiped, his characteristics. And it seems like the church, by and large, has made it their job to grossly misrepresent who God is. And they constantly wrap him in this ancient paganism. And when you read the scriptures, you'll find very quickly that he doesn't really appreciate that stuff. Now, we are supposed to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the religious leaders, for they clog the doors of heaven so that no one can enter, nor do they even go in themselves. They're like blind guides, Messiah says. If you want to hand over your eternal fate to some dude in a robe who you don't even know, that's your choice. But as for me and my house, we serve Yahweh. And we can easily read exactly what he does and what he does not want us to do. My God isn't into the whole Babylonian child sacrifice rehearsal thing. Semiramis didn't really fall into the Euphrates River in an egg. She made that crap up. Bunny rabbits are cute, but not when they're connected with the whole ancient Babylonian sex cult thing. My God is into righteousness. He's into justice, mercy. He's into love. And he is truth. Check out what he has to say sometime. It'll make a lot more sense than all that crap they're trying to tell you out there in Babylon. Suffer not of his coming wrath, but rather enter into his kingdom as his beloved sons and daughters. Peace.